press conference, I want to indicate that with me this morning is the Honourable Brian Manning, Member of Parliament for San Fernando East, the Honourable Stuart Young, Member of Parliament for Port Spain North St. Anne's West, Senator the Honourable Faris Al-Rawi. So I just want to indicate that Brian will be talking on the issue of the returns of the HFS. Stuart, as former Minister of Energy, will deal with issues relating to energy. Faris, Senator the Honourable Faris Al-Rawi, will speak about CPEP, and I will deal with issues relating to sports and emancipation. So I'll invite the Honourable Brian Manning.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Good morning to the national community of Trinidad and Tobago. Recently in the media, you would have seen the reports on the returns of the HSF. And in 2024, you would have seen that we had a record return from the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. That is the fruit of well thought out PNM policy. And it is something that I'd like to explain to the people of this country. In 2020, when I came in as a minister in the Ministry of Finance, we had discussions where there were ongoing discussions about making adjustments to the HSF due to the COVID crisis. You would have realized that there was an amendment made, I believe it was implemented in March of 2020, where the Ministry of Finance was able to access the HSF in a situation that would be determined as a disaster. And that's exactly what the COVID crisis was. From those talks, we further engaged in discussions with the board of the HSF, also the government of the central bank, to make other adjustments to that fund. And it was recommended that the HSF, or the managers of the HSF, would make a change to the strategic asset allocation of the fund. Now, what that means, the HSF currently is invested in a split format. And that is that portion of the fund is allotted to equities or shares in the stock market, and the other portion is allocated to fixed income or debt. When you look at the equity portion of the fund was formed in 2007, I believe it was formed. And from the beginning, the two portions of the equity fund were 17.5% of the entire investment portfolio. There's a US stock market investment and a non-US stock market, mainly European stocks. Now, standard portfolio management dictates that to maximize risk-adjusted return, a fund should be about 60% equities and 40% fixed income. This meant that the HSF was really underinvested in the equities portion. It was ultra-conservative. So it was determined after discussions that we would move the equity investment of the fund up to about 50% from where it was previously, which was about 35%. If you look at the governor's or the chairman's report, he would have attributed much of the success of the fund to that change in the strategic asset allocation. As you know, the higher returns would have come from the equities portion, and the fixed income portion tends to have limited returns, even though there's less risk. We would have had in the past few years several record-breaking performances of the HSF. And if you look at what was reported for 2024, the net asset value of the fund grew to $6.09 billion, and that is up from $5.4 billion from just the previous year. Much of that is attributed to the performance of the stock market, US and international, and our increase in investment in equities. So, as you know, contrary to what some may have been saying in the public domain, it was due to the policy changes from the previous government, which is why we are seeing these record results in the last few years of the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. And the HSF is not just a savings account, as I've said on several occasions. It is an investment fund. It is meant to also diversify the returns on assets of investments of this country. And that way, with an increase of income of foreign exchange, we can now put that foreign exchange to work within this economy and maybe take care of some of the shortfall that we have in terms of supply to those in the country that are seeking foreign exchange. So I just wanted to make that clear and to really inform the people of this country that the policies of the previous government is exactly why you've been seeing the record returns in Heritage and Civilization Fund. And in fact, I would implore the current government to further expand the investment in equities of the fund. If you look at the chairman's note, one of the recommendations, I believe recommendation number 2, he was saying there should be a further expansion and investment in equities. And he suggested that it should be in emerging markets. I would suggest that it should also be a portion invested in alternative assets. Alternative assets would be real estate investments, private equity, and hedge funds. It has been proven to increase the risk-adjusted return of funds around the world. And when I say risk-adjusted return, I mean it maximizes the return per unit of risk of the fund. That is how investment funds are managed. So I wanted to share that with the national community today. Thank you.
Okay, I'd now like to invite the Honourable Stuart Young. Honourable MP Young will also be speaking on the issue of Building 13.
Good morning, and thank you, Opposition Leader, the Honourable Pennelope Beckles. Good morning, members of the media, to my colleagues, and to the wider viewing and listening public of Trinidad and Tobago. As the leader has indicated, I'm here to very briefly address 2 issues, that of energy and energy security and what we're seeing happening in the field of our energy sector in Trinidad and Tobago, as well as an issue that was raised by none other than the Prime Minister in yesterday's debate on the extension of the state of emergency with respect to a building at the maximum security prison in Aruca, known as Building 13. So I'll start with energy and the energy sector. It is just to remind Trinidad and Tobago that all of the work that was done in this sector, that is really done at a global level, was done in the last 9.5 years in a very competitive and a very complex environment. And fortunately, this party, the PNM, always does what is best for Trinidad and Tobago. So I am happy to say that today what we're seeing, and we will continue to see over the next couple years, the benefits and the coming home of the work that was done by our administration. And this is very, very easy to fact check, because fortunately along the way, as we progressed, we always made sure to inform the population through the media and other means of exactly what was taking place. So very briefly, I am happy to say that one of the main items that we achieved that is actually keeping the Treasury afloat today is the restructuring of Atlantic LNG, and in particular, the foresight and the ability to negotiate better gas prices for Trinidad and Tobago's gas. So what we're seeing today, and without a shadow of a doubt, and it cannot be contradicted, is the benefit of the work that we achieved and the gas prices that we achieved and put in place in 2019. You've heard me say, and this party say on occasions, that we negotiated a basket of prices that captures 1/3 out of Asian markets, 1/3 out of European markets, and 1/3 based on oil prices. And I can tell you, when you look at it today, before all of the gas prices, or most of them, were based on Henry Hub, a mark out of the United States. Today, Henry Hub is trading at $3.06 US. We negotiated Asian prices called JKM that today is trading at $11.95 US. So that is 3 times plus almost 4 times the value of Henry Hub. The 2 European prices that we use are TTF, which is trading today at $32.49, and NBP at $10 to $12 US. So you are seeing that we have achieved during our term gas prices which could be as much as 4 times what we would have been getting. So even though production had gone down because we are a mature province, Trinidad and Tobago fortunately continues to benefit from that. And I challenge the current administration to say, because I see them claiming a lot, none of which is really attributable to anything that they have done in the last few months. So I challenge them to say, what have they negotiated? Because another thing I was quite pleased to see in the newspapers was that Trinidad and Tobago received our green hydrogen project, tops the regional energy awards. Again, it was the previous administration's cabinet, the P&M cabinet, that took the decision for us to be the first in the CARICOM region and one of the first in this part of the hemisphere to set about to have a green hydrogen project because we are perfectly poised for it. That is our work, our decision to have a pilot project. And green hydrogen has not yet become commercial across the world, meaning that the price of a molecule of green hydrogen is so far higher than the price of natural gas as the input. But we took the decision, and I'm happy to see it has been recognized. Another thing I saw recently was wind energy. And not surprisingly, the Honourable Minister of Energy, full of wind, was quick to claim he had something to do with it. Again, completely untrue. It is the previous administration that had the foresight to put Trinidad and Tobago at the forefront of alternate energy, wind, and I'll touch on solar in the whole CARICOM and this part of the world and the region. So what you're seeing now are the results of the decisions we took. So the wind reports that have come in were part of and remain part of a P&M policy plan to provide for Trinidad and Tobago to ensure that our grid, our electricity grid, is powered by both wind and solar, and also that that clean energy, green energy, can be utilized to produce green hydrogen going forward in the future. So again, that is all the People's National Movement. Of course, Project Lara, you all have been hearing about that for ages. As you know by now, we signed that agreement in December 2022. Hard negotiations, complex negotiations. The Honourable Marvin Gonzalez is here. He was the Minister of Public Utilities at the time. We had to work closely together to find the price, and we achieved a lower price. At the time, the UNC was trying to attack it. But it is now delivered and is the largest solar project in the whole Caribbean region. Again, done under us. The sod for it was turned by the previous Prime Minister, Dr. Rowley, myself, Minister Gonzalez was there at the time. And I believe as Minister of Planning, the Honourable Pennelope Beckles was also there at the time. And it was us who turned the sod for that in 2023. These things in the energy sector take time to come to fruition. All of the gas projects that we negotiated, every single one that you're seeing come to fruition now, Mento, SIP, BP's SIP is going to the second part of its project. These are the things that are keeping Trinidad and Tobago alive. Every single one was negotiated by the former administration for the benefit of Trinidad and Tobago. I am actually concerned as a citizen because the only energy deal that was negotiated by the UNC in the previous administration, which was the CGCL deal, continues to cost Trinidad and Tobago billions of dollars in losses. When I see what went on, the recent debacle with the appointment of a chairman at arguably one of the most important crown jewels of Trinidad and Tobago, the National Gas Company. One day is X, next day is Y. Next day is still X, next day is Y. And then finally we see who became the chairman of National Gas Company. This does not augur well, but fortunately it was the work done. Recently we had the Honourable Minister of Energy, Minister Munilal, come out and with big hurrah, and I understand because he has to prove to his Prime Minister and the Cabinet what it is that he's doing. So he has to find something he could claim and to refer to a cabinet note and to say that he has retrieved $7 billion, complete rubbish. Not true. Because the deal that he's referring to is a deep water deal, Calypso, that has not even reached close to FID as yet. So if An error was made. I'm glad it was picked up, and I'm certain it wasn't picked up by him. It was picked up by the same efficient public servants and Woodside who they're in discussions with, and it was corrected, as happens. As happened. And today, I repeat the question, because it has not been answered. Is Woodside packing up and leaving Trinidad and Tobago? That is the question under this UNC government, because I can say, again, you go and check open source. Over the years, I met on several occasions all across the globe with the CEO of Woodside, Ms. Meg O'Neill from Australia. We met several times in Houston to ensure that we extracted everything we could from Woodside. Has Woodside taken a decision to depart Trinidad and Tobago? All of the deals, and I've listed them time and time again, and I will continue to do so. Shell with Aphrodite, we see Shell with Colibri, all of these. We see Touchstone increasing production, again, the acquisition of Central Block, all of that was done under the previous administration. What you see Perenco doing, all of it was done and approved by the previous administration. Their acquisition of assets in BP, their acquisition of assets from Woodside, the same Woodside, and it was done with P&M policy, ensuring that a smaller, more nimble operator who is able to take quicker decisions and willing to take different risks would continue to do the best for Trinidad and Tobago. I have not heard a single new project, and I don't expect to either. Again, I'll end on the energy side at this time by reminding the population, one of the first things the Prime Minister said on being sworn in, and she actually said it at President's House, Dragon is dead. And we will go to Grenada, we'll go to Guyana, we'll go to Suriname. Well, we know how that worked out. What is in Grenada? A well that was shut down before it was even completed. Nothing. Guyana, we've had, embarrassingly, the government of Guyana come out and say, not so. Even though they may be saying we're willing to talk after the elections, we had been exploring conversation with them. It is not simple. And the UNC is learning, and unfortunately is going to affect us in Trinidad and Tobago, learning that in the energy sector, it is not about hot air. And the gas that you're exposing is not valuable gas. So the same goes for Suriname. We explored what we could in Suriname. I remember at the beginning, he's approved, the Honourable Minister of Energy, a project, a solar project. Again, that was all done by the previous administration. So not a single thing of benefit to Trinidad and Tobago in the energy sector has come out of the last 3 months, and I don't expect very much. And I end on the energy sector by cautioning Trinidad and Tobago, look very closely at what happens with the refinery, because the previous administration went through proper processes, open tenders, open evaluations, but what we're seeing taking place now with the setting up of a committee in silence, and all of a sudden hiding under confidentiality. The procurement and the disposal of these state assets, in particular the refinery, must be carefully looked at, because it is going to cost billions of dollars to restart that refinery. And we were clear, anyone who had the wherewithal, the money to do it, as well as the crude oil as the input, come and talk. Come and talk. So I end on the energy sector on that note, because you can see all of the projects, and there are more to come, which we will list out. The other matter that I've come here today to deal with was raised by the Prime Minister in yesterday's debate, and that's Building 13. Of course, in national security issues, one must always be careful and cautious, especially when dealing with the prison, to save very, very little, because you don't want proper law enforcement and proper services that are trying to deal with criminality to be exposed. The concept for Building 13 at the time was conceptualized under the previous administration with me as the Minister of National Security, but sitting down with the then Commissioner of Police, Griffith, the then Chief of Defence Staff, who's still the Chief of Defence Staff, the head of the SSA, and the Commissioner of Prisons. Building 13 was an empty building, and at the time, the same thing you're hearing the government complain of today. with these nefarious leaders and that they were meeting together in yards, etc., there was a need to separate them. And Building 13 was identified because it was empty, it was sterilized, all that needed to be put in was put in, and it was with the complete agreement of the Commissioner of Prisons at the time and the prison service. Because one must always understand, it is the prison service in charge of the prisons. A minister can give policy direction. A minister can ask for things to be done. So can a commissioner of police. But it is up to the prison service to implement. Building 13 was introduced. It had a concept of utilizing defense force personnel on rotation, masked, as well as police on rotation, masked. So at no point in time could the prisoners know who they were, and they were rotated so no relationships could be formed, and a prison officer, because prisons are under the control of the prison officers. And it worked. Unfortunately, and I can even say that in the utilization of it and putting some of the leaders into Building 13 separate, they were not allowed to meet together. And it worked for a time. Unfortunately, as I said, all a government can do is introduce policy. And again, within a matter of a week or 2 weeks of utilizing it, the government received pre-action protocol letters from those who were incarcerated in Building 13, saying that their rights were being infringed and there was solitary confinement, which went nowhere. Because at the time, it was properly carried out. So, it is very, very fictitious for the Prime Minister to come and say what she did yesterday and try to lay that. But I understand it, the personal attacks, that is her way. But I am sure that if you go to the Commissioner of Police at the time, he will tell you much more on what it was, the concept of Building 13, and how successful it was, until, unfortunately, those in charge of the prisons decided to do otherwise. So I'd like to thank you all very much and to thank the leader for my time this morning.
Okay, in the interest of time, there is Senate today, so that I know we have Faris that has to leave. So what I'm going to do is, if you have any questions to ask the Honourable Stuart Young, you can do it, and then I'll have Brian come back because I forgot. And then I'll Faris and then myself.
All right, thank you. That's not an invitation. Go on, Jesse.
In your opinion, what went wrong at Building 13? I mean, you indicated that it would have worked for a week or two.
I didn't say it worked for a week or two. I said within a week or two we received pre-action protocol letters.
Right.
It worked for a number of years. As I say, and all I'm prepared to say at this stage, prisons are under the jurisdiction of the prison service, the Commissioner of Prisons, the prison officers, etc. We saw, yesterday in the debate we heard, and we heard even before that, the current Commissioner of Police said on the 18th of July, when they declared the state of emergency, a raid was carried out at maximum security at 6 a.m. and they showed us the haul of contraband, including phones that were found. And he then came and said, or the government said a few days later, even though it was cleared within a matter of days, they were back in there. It is up to the prison service, and I've heard what the Prison Officers Association has said. So we ask that they be given all of the resources. But at the end of the day, prisons are under the control of the prison service.
Another comment that was made yesterday was about the drone issues, about them being used to drop contraband. Was this something that was known to the government at the time? And what
we have seen,
did you do?
Ms. Lindo, you have actually seen, I'm sure you have seen, the prisons all over the world, if you do some research, face these problems. Prisons all over the world are facing use of technology, drone technology. But I have seen videos right here, unfortunately, at the prisons in Port of Spain, of people on the outside lobbing stuff on the inside. That is one of the instances, that is one of the problems of trying to keep a prison sterile. So it is absolutely nothing new. To call a state of emergency on that basis, that is of concern to me. So the answer is yes, that existed, and yes, the resources were always given and the assistance given to try and combat it, but it is something, unfortunately, that prisons all over the world are facing now, and not only with the prison system. The use of drone technology all over the world has changed the direction of security and national security.
And the Prime Minister also would have said that by putting these gang leaders in one place, that it enabled them to form a crime syndicate.
So the answer to that is absolutely not. The concept of Building 13 is an excellent concept because they were all kept separate. They were not aired together. They were not allowed to exercise together, whereas that is exactly what was happening when they were in general remand and in other areas of the prison service, because there you are allowed to interact, etc. So initially, when Building 13's concept was being faithfully carried out, it prevented that, and that is what led to the pre-action protocol letters against the government, threatening the government. We held firm. But as I say, the prison service, the prisons, the physical prisons are under the control of the prison service. We can only give policy direction. Okay? Thank you all very much.
Good morning again, everyone. Any questions about the HSF, economy, or finance?
Is there anything you think the government should be wary of at this time, especially considering what is going on between the major trading partners, the US, the UK, etc.?
Yes. Well, what's concerning at this point in time is that the HSF is under threat because of what was done by this government. They decided, and many persons warned them, they decided to foolishly forego several of the major revenue-generating projects that were really implemented and decided on by the previous government, such as the TTRA, the property taxes, also the Dragon Field. All of these projects were designed to increase revenues for the use of the government. And you have to remember, the state has access to two sources of revenue. It's really energy royalties and also taxation. So with the absence of these revenue-generating projects, it puts a lot of strain on the HSF because now they are tempted to access the HSF more often to really support some of their fiscal expenditure because the revenues aren't coming from anywhere else. And that is a major concern. The HSF, yes, is a form of diversification. It's also a saving account for the people of this country. But it cannot be solely relied on in the absence of revenues from other projects. And there's a concern that the government will be tempted to dip heavily into the HSF going forward simply because they have backed themselves into an economic corner and will have difficulty generating revenues from any other source because they have cancelled the major ones that were implemented by the previous administration. Especially to keep some of their incredible promises to the members of the public service. I mean, by our calculations, to pay back pay to the public service is going to cost this country approximately between $9 to $10 billion for back pay. And that would lead to recurrent expenditure of about $250 million annually going forward. We continue to ask of the government, where are these revenues going to come from? We are yet to get an answer. I saw that the S&P credit ratings company or business is here in Trinidad and Tobago to evaluate our economy. And I'm sure that they're going to be asking the same questions that the opposition has been asking of this government. I don't expect a rating downgrade this time around because usually these credit rating agencies would be willing to give a new government a grace period. But as I've said previously, the honeymoon is not going to be very long for this government. And other credit rating agencies, the IMF, World Bank, and other parties that would really examine our economy are going to ask of this government the same question. Where are the revenues coming from? And we are yet to have heard any kind of reasonable answer to that question.
As Shadow Finance Minister, generally, are you satisfied with what you've been hearing in terms of the government's articulation of plans for the economy? They've cited many a times that it will entail a lot of restructuring, going into organizations and conducting audits, etc. Is that sufficient? Are you concerned that perhaps maybe not enough is being said to address the economy head on in terms of many of the issues that are presenting itself?
Absolutely not. All we've heard thus far is gobbledygook from the government. We've heard no clear strategy or plan in terms of revenue generation for this economy. We've heard nothing in terms of creating employment for the people of this country, and that is the major concern. At the same time, while cancelling these revenue-generating projects, they're also putting people in this country on the breadline. And running a government or running a country is not like running a business. You can't decide that because your expenses are too high, you send people home. Because when you create unemployment in CPEP and URP and Forestry Division and so on, those persons begin now, because they were already some of the more vulnerable people of this country, begin to lean on the social services. So one way or the other, government is going to pay to have to support some of these employees of this country. So now again, they've just created more chaos and crisis in this country in terms of employment. Instead of having these persons doing productive activity in these agencies, many of them created by the People's National Movement to protect and assist some of the more vulnerable people of this country, they now move them into the social services area where they have to receive grants and other subsidies from the state, and that has to be paid for by taxpayers of this country. We keep asking, and we will continue to ask, what is the plan for this economy going forward? What is the plan for revenue generation? What is the plan for creating employment for the people of this country? We are yet to hear any kind of reasonable answer from this government. So we have not heard any plan, much less one that we are satisfied with thus far. All right. Thank you so much.
So I'll now invite Senator Al-Rawi.
Thank you, Honourable Leader. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us again. As you can tell, we're keeping the time frames quite tight. So I've come to address the issue of CPEP in light of several public statements and even parliamentary statements as recently as yesterday. You would have heard the Leader of the Opposition speak to the CPEP and URP in a particular direction, claiming that they were empires of criminal activity. Pardon? Yeah, the Prime Minister, Mrs. Prasad Bisesa, spoke to CPEP as an empire of criminal activity and URP as an empire of criminal activity. For the record, in the period 2010 to 2015, CPEP ran very large programs under the UNC. And in the year 2014 to 2015, the subvention from the UNC was $725,705,808. Let me repeat that. $726 million was spent in CPEP, as compared to $358 million spent by the PNM government. You would note that in that period of time, CPEP wasn't the only program that Mrs. Prasad Bisesa ran. She ran the life sport program. The life sport program, which has just featured in the news pursuant to a High Court decision by Mr. Justice Rahim, which said very plainly that the board would be held with fiduciary responsibility for a fraudulent contract effectively. $34 million for e-beam for numeracy and literacy that never happened. $34 million given away. But the judge said something that was very careful. The judge said that the board shouldn't rubber stamp the ministry's decision. The minister was Anil Roberts. He's still in the government. He's now a government minister again. So on CPEP, I am mindful of the fact that the minister, former Minister, Finance Minister Imbert, has spoken already. We have had several press conferences to deal with CPEP and the workers. 11,000 people have been fired. Our opposition says very plainly, if there are allegations of criminal activity anywhere in this country, investigate. Do as you must, let the chips fall where they may. But under no circumstances will we take allegations just made lablash, anyhow, anywhere, particularly coming from the UNC. There is litigation, CV number 2025 02737 Eastman Enterprises Limited versus CPEP. And I'm very conscious, and we've been very conscious, not to speak to issues that could affect litigation. See the UNC on a gallery show, Faris not saying anything. Rubbish! We've spoken, but the key is to win the war, not the battle. The war is to make sure that 11,000 workers that Mr. Manning just reflected on receive their just payments. Yesterday we heard the Prime Minister say to the workers in a cavalier way, if you didn't get paid, it's because the contractor didn't pay you. Mrs. Prasad Bisessa knows that CPEP pays the contractors directly. She knows that they have not been paid. In the Eastman case, the case is very simple. They rely on the contract. That case is before Madam Justice Margaret Mohammed. In that particular litigation, allegations have been made that do not relate to the cause of action in that claim. There was no leave to put in the affidavit evidence that happened. There are striking out applications to happen. But in the UNC speak, you're hearing them speak in that litigation. And yesterday I heard the Prime Minister speak about ministers putting CPEP under pressure to renew contracts. Let me state plainly that I, certainly as the last minister that served with responsibility for CPEP, never spoke to renewal of en masse contracts. I did, together with the Minister of Finance, Vishnu Danpal, the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Finance, Suzette Lichi, and the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, Mr. Peter Mitchell, speak to the funding for 12 CPEP contractors, and that was sorted out PS to PS. Minister Danpal is here, he can verify that. We had joint telephone calls, etc. We did have that conversation, but let me make it clear. The issue of en masse employment and contract renewals is not a new feature in CPEP. The same Keith Eddy, who is speaking in the public domain, in 2023, sought a mass renewals for 3 years. There was no cabinet approval. Minister Imbert spoke to the reasons why. Because Minister Imbert referred you to a 2017 cabinet decision, the content of which was the subject of a letter written by the Ministry of Finance to Mr. Keith Eddy. Minister Padarat knows all about it because featuring under Mr. Padarat's hands, very loquacious Mr. Padarat, express article published, liberal quotes from the butcher himself, Barry Padarat. This is the Express dated 14th July 2025. Minister Padarat says, after reviewing the note, and is referring specifically to a note in 2017, the minister noted that the PNM is doing the same thing. They are doing the same thing. The PNM is hypocritical because he's alleging that the PNM fired people in 2017, and he refers to a cabinet note, and he goes, cabinet note dated July 27, 2017, titled The Way Forward with Respect to CPEP. And there, published in the newspapers, coming from Padarat himself, is the full content of the note that specifically speaks to new contractors to be added in the context of the need to maintain the efficacy of CPEP and its primary aim for environmental protection and enhancement as deemed appropriate, and in the previous paragraphs, as deemed appropriate by CPEP itself. These notes didn't feature in any affidavit evidence. You know what you call that in court? Material non-disclosure. They have not featured in Minister Padarat's gallerying attempts at a constant high-pitched volume that he constantly engages in. Nothing like that. Minister Padarat did not refer to the 2014 cabinet decision under Minister then Rudal Munilal, which ballooned the CPEP program, as I told you, to nearly $700 million plus. And Minister Padarat certainly did not speak, or CPEP speak, to the letter which Minister Padarat in this Express article refers to. And they specifically, the Express also received another document from Padarat, I assume. A letter dated August 29, 2017 from the Ministry of Finance Permanent Secretary to Keith Eddy, CPEP Company Limited General Manager, informing him of cabinet decisions. But you're not galls me. what galls me is CPEP, in its approved procurement policy, has the CPEP Company Limited approved procurement policy. It says that it's the chief executive officer is accountable to the board of directors for the exercise of procurement delegated to him. No mention of that. The strategic framework of RDLG up to 2026, which covers CPEP as well. And then there is something called Central Audit Committee reports produced by the Ministry of Finance. And you know what is amazing? Here is the same Keith Eddy under a letter of December 11th, 2023 to the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Finance, justifying in writing the rationale for increasing core contractors. And let me quote for you here. It should be noted that Cabinet Minute number 1327 dated July 27, 2017 states, and the same Keith Eddy provides the full Cabinet decision. Based on the foregoing, CPEP did not act against Cabinet's decision. Rather, the Cabinet decision provides for the engagement of contractors. He deals with it both on a month-to-month basis and new contractors to be introduced in the context of the need to maintain the efficacy of CPEP and its primary aim. None of that has been disclosed by the deponent himself, or worse yet, by the line minister, Barry Padarat, who knows everything. The man literally knows everything. De facto prime minister, if not de jure prime minister. Up and down, parading all over Trinidad and Tobago, buffing people left, right, and center. So the latest pivot, ladies and gentlemen, is to say CPEP corrupt. They are now associated with URP and other places in the state of emergency. You heard that yesterday. I can tell you as line minister for a short while for CPEP, I received one report from the police as to a questionable issue coming from beneficial ownership law, which I introduced with this government, led by this government. We passed law to go behind the true owners of companies. And that was referred quickly to the Permanent Secretary and other places for action. And I am shocked because I've received no other police reports in that regard. Any form of contracts recommended is par for the course, but they're procured by the system of law. You have to go through the PDAC committee. You have to go through the public procurement law. It is up to the legal requirements being ticked off as the CPEP procurement policy says the CEO is entitled to. You can't dissociate yourself from that without legal claim. But there's one other thing as I wrap up now to point out. Sometimes you have to watch who's bringing the message. The man that is bringing the message in the litigation is a fellow named Anand Ramlogan. You all know him? Anand Ramlogan is the senior counsel of choice for this government. And Mr. Ramlogan, I would like to put on the record, is a fellow that has, in my view, a few questions to ask of himself and to answer. Mr. Anand Ramlogan, it is not lost upon me, is the subject of several written statements from me given to the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service at their request. Let me repeat that. The police came to me and asked me to give written statements on Anand Ramlogan, specifically information number 35278 of 2017, information number 35279 of 2017, number 12770 Inspector Arlette Grooms versus Anand Ramlogan. And again, multiple statements requested by the police of me. Information number 1283 North Sergeant Tony versus Anand Ramlogan and another. You think Ramlogan don't have an axe to grind against me? And I invite you, ladies and gentlemen of the media, to go and read the Court of Appeal decision just issued. In the case of Criminal Appeal Application number 012 of 2023, Criminal High Court number 0319, between Vincent Leonard Nelson, King's Counsel, applicant, and the Director of Public Prosecutions, respondent, issued this morning. Panel N. Barrow J.A., J. Abu, J.A., G. Henderson, J.A. A unanimous decision of the Court of Appeal refusing Mr. Nelson's attempt to seek to set aside his conviction. And in that, I will simply point out, on at least 11 occasions, Mr. Nelson has confessed to guilt, which he has been sentenced, convicted and sentenced for. And he has never recanted the statements that he made now, at least 11 times, including before the DPP in a plea agreement, a High Court judge, a magistrate, a High Court again, the Court of Appeal, etc. He has never recanted his statement that he engaged in bribery and that he paid bribes to people, including Mr. Anand Ramlogan, the lawyer of choice for the UNC government. And I'll say one more thing. A man against whom there is civil action by none other than the Office of the Attorney General. There is existent, live, civil action for fraud, including other causes of action. But that man is now hired by the UNC government, by the Attorney General. Perhaps the Honourable Attorney General has not reviewed the case yet. He's looking at it, etc. But King's Counsel in the United Kingdom saw it fit. That is existing litigation. So you folks, answer this question. Do you find it strange that allegations are being made now in the manner that they're being made by a team led by Anand Ramlogan? Can you accept it the way it is coming? It's not often that you say, look at the messenger, you say, listen to the message. But these are very real issues, and I will have, and I'm sure you will have, a lot more to say as more facts are unveiled in due course with due process in mind. I thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, so we take questions. Any questions to Senator Al-Rawi, and then I'll be the last, and then we wrap up because our time is, as I said, running out because of Senate today.
Any questions, folks?
Senator Al-Rawi, with those information not being put into the court documents and being filed in court, what? With those documents not being put into the court records and filed in the High Court in the CPEP matter, what does that mean for the government? Well, the government case at this point in time.
So the litigation brought by Eastman does not involve an examination of what CPEP did or didn't do, etc. The litigation is a matter of contract, and it says, listen, I want to enforce my contract. You shouldn't have broken it the way you did. CPEP's response so far has been, well, we have a lot more things to come. The claimant's position is really quite simple. That's none of my business. I rely on the contract. You must expect, therefore, that Mr. Ramlogan, carrying out the government's objective of tarring and feathering and dirtying any and everybody in the PNM, they're going to go on a wild goose chase that'll end in frustration and futility to try and just tarnish everybody's name by making aha allegations. You get a snippet here and a snippet there. But that matter, which is why I haven't gone too far down, is why I left it alone. It's in litigation. I am not a representative in those matters on the record, but having heard what the Prime Minister said yesterday, I was compelled to come this morning to deal with the issues. Minister Imbut has spoken already to the Cabinet authorization in 2017, and he also spoke to the Cabinet authorization given in 2025, because Khadija Amin, Barry Padarat, and Saddam Hussein in the supplementation of Appropriation 2025 came, and the Hansard I have, to get money for contracts issued just before the election. So that is a cabinet decision. There is cabinet authority, be it in 2017 according to Minister Imbert, or be it in 2025 in the supplementation of appropriation. But when you hurry to make allegations, you will make disastrously bad mistakes as they have done. And my point that I'm raising here this morning in part is that you have to watch the people who are bringing these messages. Mrs. Prasad Bisessa is talking about criminality. When days ago, the live sport criminality came back up. The state of emergency involves the transportation of Raji Ali of live sport fame from building 13 to another undisclosed place. We're going to Senate today to deal with a prisons order to treat with that. Live sport is very much alive. But Anil Roberts, in the Ministry of Sport, it's that Ministry of Sport that the Justice Rahim said, listen, these directors that I'm holding liable, they should not have rubber stamped the ministry's direction to just give contracts and fraudulent contracts of the type that eBeam had. So I'm trying to say, there is the UNC painting a picture of PNM and this Anil Roberts in the cabinet of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago as a minister of government again. Raji Ali being transported from one place to another in the life sport fame that he has. So you need to be careful at the agenda that is happening. Our restraint in raising every tit for tat point is not where you go, because you have to deal with it in court. There are court matters.
The question was asked to the Honourable Minister about the audit of CPEP. CPEP not being audited for the past 7 years. Is that true?
I couldn't say. I'm not a member of the government. If there's an audit, conduct an audit. Remember, what you find needs to be truthfully brought out. There needs to be a right to respond. You deal with it. Let the facts fall where they may with proper process. We have no objection to that. CPEP has been audited under Minister Imbert, central audit committees, etc., the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Rural Development, etc. Do whatever audit you can. We introduce the law to raise transparency in companies, etc., so that we could find who true owners are, etc. I don't engage in the procurement of contracts as a minister. No minister ought to. We don't issue or sign contracts. The contracts signed in these instances here are under the hand of a fellow named Keith Eddy. He's the CEO of CPEP. They have a written policy saying that he deals with procurement with a PDAC committee, etc. So what I'm saying is the full facts need to be presented so that you know where you stand. If there's an audit, so be it.
But last question.
With this information now coming out, and being that the government would have been it is allegedly to mislead the court, would the claimant now be asking that criminal charges be brought against the?
I'm not going to go into the litigation.
Okay.
Just remember, these matters are sub judice.
Okay.
That is going in another direction.
And I'll just simply say in answer to that, these are not now being brought out. I referred you to the Express article where Padarat was Ramajin himself, reading from the same cabinet note. So they didn't now come out. They just think everybody's stupid. That's all.
You have a question?
Yeah, just perspective on this real fast, right? After referring to CPAP as a right? Do you believe that perhaps the mass cancellation of CPEP contracts would have perhaps angered some people enough so that they would have perhaps triggered gang leaders to respond, which would have essentially then triggered the state of emergency?
That's a real far ask. Crime has been a feature that everybody has been wrestling with for a long while. It is this government that had deprecated the calling of a state of emergency. Minister Young was then acting Attorney General and gave reasons very similar to the ones happening right now. We supported the state of emergency yesterday because security services say so. As for the workers, I think Brian Manning hit the nail on the head. You sent home, there are about 30,000 people gone home, 10,000 in URP, 11,000 in CPEP, 5,000 in forestry. Then you added 900 in the state enterprises, the RHAs, etc., another 800. You're looking at 20 to 30,000 people easily on your way up to 50,000 with no relief. So you're going to tax the social services deliveries. You have two ministers in the Ministry of the People, both of them happily quiet, Vandana Mohit and whoever the young lady is otherwise. There's nothing that is happening to try and treat with the rest. So all that I will say in dealing with these issues is that we have to connect the dots and it is a measure of responsibility. I want to hear Mrs. Prasad Bisesta talk about live sport, Raji Ali, the judgment in the live sport matter, and Mr. Roberts. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm going to be the last. I want to indicate to the press that I have been invited by the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean to attend a parliamentary summit on climate change and just transition in Brazil, and that takes place on the 6th to the 7th of August. And so that I will be traveling. Of course, those are matters very important to Trinidad and Tobago, the Caribbean, and the world. This, of course, is in preparation for the 30th conference of the parties, which will take place in Brazil in November 2025. I want to raise an issue as it relates to the Sport TT board, and I would like to call on the government, the Honourable Prime Minister, to appoint a board of Sport TT and to consider this as a very, very urgent matter. I'm specifically making reference to today's, an article of today dated the 29th of July 2025, where the Minister of Sports indicates that the absence of a sport company board, as he sees it, is not really a major issue. I would like to say that the minister went on to say that the government starts with bigger boards like Heritage Petroleum, the A-class boards, and then of course they will come down. So in truth and in fact, I assume what he's saying is that one sport company is not an A-class board, and that the government clearly, in appointing other A-class boards like Heritage and so, that those are the more important boards, and the sport company is not one. For all of us here in Trinidad and Tobago, we understand the significance of sports. If you looked at the Tennis Association, they indicated that they had to cancel 11 of the 13 tournaments, and what they said is that what it means is that, you know, you have reduced competitive opportunities, both local and regional. And then, of course, you have the hockey board indicating that they fail to field the men's and women's senior teams on the ongoing Pan Am Hockey Cups. Now, of course, for those of you who follow sport, you have hockey that is taking place in 2026. And it's not only the non-attendance. This is the first time in the history of the Pan Am hockey tournaments that Trinidad and Tobago is happening. First time. But that is not all. You see, if you don't attend, you're going to be recorded as forfeiting your matches, losing by a 5-0 margin. And I'm sure that most of you would have followed Trinidad and Tobago's record of performance in hockey over the years. We have been one of the best performing countries in that area. And that is very unfortunate that, I mean, based on the interpretation, clearly, you know, what is the view as it relates to sports? You would have also followed that traditionally there is a youth camp that comes up every year. Unfortunately, the Sport TTCU says that organizers simply ran out of time to research. So in other words, you don't have any vacation sports, and they have indicated because of the process for approval, we would not have been able to get to that sorted out in time. So you have that, you have the Sport and Culture Fund, and we know this is summertime. I mean, not just in terms of the parents and looking for activity, but it's the significance of not having a sports board. We see what's going on in West Indies cricket. I wouldn't really want to comment on that, but I mean, the fact of the matter, we understand how important sports is, you know. Some people don't like to talk about, you know, what is the likelihood of people involved in sports in a lot of other communities where crime is taking place. I mean, we know the significance of that. Whether it's football, whether it's cricket, whether it's table tennis, it matters not. So we are calling on the government and the Prime Minister, please. Yes, you have your E-class board to appoint, but whether you consider sports B-class or C-class, the people of Trinidad and Tobago deserve that the Sport TT board be appointed so that all these important sporting activities continue. The last matter that I want to deal with is the issue of emancipation. Now, we know that this year is 40 years since the Honourable George Chambers, where emancipation was officially declared a holiday and now called African Emancipation. You would have heard the Honourable Minister of Culture speak yesterday, literally politicizing emancipation. And a press release coming out from her ministry, really in essence saying that Emancipation Support Committee needs to be reformed, that they need to, they're asking for too much money. Let me place on record that those of us in Trinidad and Tobago would recognize that the Emancipation Support Committee over the years has been responsible for ensuring that emancipation is celebrated every year. So yes, you have the issue, and if you looked over the years as the amount of money that has been contributed, they have contributed, the People's National Movement has contributed. I mean, we all look forward to the 1st of August when we can celebrate emancipation. So, yes, and I mean, I saw that, recently when I spoke about the issue of Mr. Moody coming, I saw an article saying shameless award for Moody. Let me make it abundantly clear that I never said that. And if you read the article, I never said that. What I spoke about is I made it abundantly clear that under Dr. the Honourable Keith Rowley, when he was the Prime Minister, we recognized the challenges for small island states in obtaining COVID. And the government of India was one of the countries that ensured that Trinidad and Tobago got our COVID vaccines, which we could not get. And we were very appreciative of that. The point I was making, ironically, the UNC took the government to court. The UNC did not support, as a matter of fact, they condemned the fact that we received those vaccinations. Mm-hmm. But if you listen to the main reason why the Honourable Prime Minister of India was given the award was the COVID vaccine. So the shame is on Kamla Prasad Bisesa. We all recognize that Mr. Moody is a Prime Minister of India, with one of the largest populations of the world. We could think of the advancement in technology, in agriculture. I mean, if you go and you do your research, you would see that this MOU that was signed as it relates to the whole issue of digital transformation was signed under the Honourable Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley. So that the advancements that they are talking about, and if you listen, and the agricultural as well agreement that was signed. And if you listen to the Honourable Prime Minister, in the Parliament, the Prime Minister spoke about $1 billion plus, positive as it relates to trade. I mean, that didn't happen 2 months ago with India. That happened because of the fact that of the policies. And I mean, do you really believe that in 2 months, the Honourable Prime Minister would have gotten Mr. Moody to come to Trinidad? And it wasn't only just Mr. Moody. I mean, we have had, go back into history. I mean, Indira Gandhi came here since from Dr. Eric Williams. So our relationship with India has always been second to none. I mean, Dr. Rowley also met with the Prime Minister of India as well in Guyana with the CARICOM India, development of relationships. So that, I just want to make it clear that please don't go and say that I said the award was shameless, because I never said it, right? I mean, all of us understand the relationship that we had with India over the years. We continue to value that relationship, whether it be in agriculture, whether it be in technology, whether it be in digital transformation. I mean, and we celebrated the fact that India was one of the first countries to say to Trinidad and Tobago, here are some vaccines. So that, it was unfortunate that, the Honourable Minister going to the Emancipation Village would then make a complimentary statement. You go to the same village organized by the Emancipation Support Committee. I saw them walking through the village, the Honourable Prime Minister and the Minister of Culture, and then you say to them, well, all they're asking for too much money. Okay? So any questions, please?
If the government is deliberately not funding these sporting activities, especially during the July August vacation, and as well as some of these sport body
because they want to paint the narrative that these things are probably costing too much money, and to also put into the public domain that, look, they're not seeing no results from it.
I cannot say that it is deliberate, and I didn't say that.
No,
My
I never
point
say.
is, no, well, I am going
No.
based on what the minister said. I mean, you can draw that inference, but my point is this, that it is the minister is saying that Sportit is not an A-class board. That's the point, right? He's saying that several others have been appointed, but they're not A-class. So he says, and they're coming down, and they're coming down. So obviously they didn't reach down there. But in the meantime, the fact is that sport is being impacted, and we are asking the government to address that matter with some urgency. Thank you very much.
You spoke about is there, what is the party's perspective on the firing of the 72 Civilian Conservation Corps trainers, as well as the fact that that program did not have an intake?
Well, I mean, it is, again, you go back to an issue of priority. I mean, this is to me continuing with CPEP, reforestation, URP. So in other words, it is a policy of the government. I mean, we all understand that the Civilian Conservation Corps is a very, very important intervention for young people, and it is really extremely unfortunate that the government has taken that decision and you don't see a clear position. I mean, those are things that you should come out clearly and say this is an intervention. Of course, if you want to put in place and you want to take in a new group of persons, you put in your new policy, that's fine. But the truth is that we all understand that all of these programs under the Ministry of Youth is extremely important. I mean, we talk about the SOEs, we talk about crime. Yesterday I was talking about what are the intervention means, what is your crime plan. We all understand that if you're going to deal with crime, it's not just a question of the SOE, and that's the point that the opposition was making. The Honourable Stuart Young, who spoke, the Honourable Marvin Gonzalez, who spoke, the Honourable Kareem Marcel. We are saying, and we supported the SOE because we understand as a responsible opposition, nobody is going to say after 1990, after 1970, I mean, all of what transpired, people who have died, the kidnapping, we are going to support the government once they bring good legislation, and we supported them. But we are also asking you, what is your crime plan? Thank you very much.
Just ask real briefly on that note, Naman. Please, I'm horribly sorry, but let me just ask briefly on that. You know, yesterday during her debate, the Prime Minister articulated anti-crime strategy, and it involved institutional reform, enhanced police capabilities, intelligence-driven operations, etc. You know, Mr. Manning here saying buzzwords, catchphrases.
Yeah.
What's your position on that in terms of her articulating this plan?
Well, let us be honest, right? If the government comes up, I mean, we pressure them enough, and they say they have that's the plan. You know, it is one thing to speak it, you know, is another thing to see the action, because you have to roll out, you know, and the results. As I said that, I mean, I was quite frank. And I mean, the Honourable Stuart Young is a former Minister of National Security, so it was Marvin Gonzalez. I mean, we had an SOE, so we can't play hypocrite and pretend that it's something that we didn't have. I also maintain that the reason for the intervention is that you do see, you know, certainly a reduction in criminal activity. But on the whole, as a country, we all recognize that you have issues as it relates to, you know, human rights, restriction of movement, all kinds of things. Then Trinidad and Tobago, you go onto a watch list. So okay, fine, you this is your plan. Let us see when it would be implemented. Let us see the time frames. Let us see your actual intervention. So we are waiting. We are prepared, as we have said, to give them some opportunities. Really, very quickly.
I just wanted to hear your view on, because MP Young would have spoken about the blooper by having the Commissioner of Police make the announcement about the SOE, number one. Number two, we hear the Commissioner of Police agreeing with standing ground laws. And number three, we see where the Commissioner of Police is taking direction from the Commissioner, from the Cabinet to remove security from former Prime Ministers. Is it that the Commissioner is now political?
Well, I mean, it's interesting that yesterday the Honourable Prime Minister said this is the first time you have a Commissioner of Police that is not political. What is interesting with the SOE is that it is the Commissioner of Police that announced it. He put out a press release. I mean, and it's not his decision. I mean, certain information goes to the National Security Council, but you also heard, if I recall correctly, Stuart, if you could remind me of that, the Attorney General said his speech was vetted by the... So, all right. Okay.
You can speak about the independence of the commissioner, ma'am.
Thank you very much, everyone.